the third reading class in the Skills Surge course. Last time we went through the first two passages from practice test 1 from the College Board. This time we're going to go through the last 3. So we have 3 passages to go through. Before we start that, though, we're going to put up a survey that it'd be great if you filled out just before we get started with the actual reading section. Awesome. Okay, I am going to start sharing my screen here 1 second. Let me know in the chat if you can see that, just so I'm sure that before I start. We're going to start with the third passage here, which is the passage about DNA. So if you can, it'd be great if you printed off the last 3 passages, and even a bubble sheet is cool. That we're going to have the bubble sheet on the survey on your screen so that you can enter your answers there. What we're going to do, basically, I'm going to read through it, kind of discuss it, and then we'll give you guys the opportunity to answer the questions on your own. We'll give you 10 minutes to do that, and then we'll come back and look at the ones that were the hardest. All right. I am going to begin here. So when we're starting with the passage, we know it's a science passage, first of all, so we can prepare for that in our heads. And then it's always really helpful to read the blurb at the beginning, just so we know kind of where we're headed. So here we go. The passage is adapted from J.D. Watson and F.H.C. Crick, Genetical Implications of the Structure of Deoxyribonucleic Acid, DNA. 1953. That's kind of important to recognize. This was published a long time ago. Watson and Crick deduced the structure of DNA using evidence from Rosalind Franklin and R.G. Gosling's X-ray crystallography diagrams of DNA and Erwin Chargaff's data on the base composition of DNA. Basically, they used this information that other scientists had collected already to figure out the structure of DNA. So as we go into this, we're thinking about DNA, we're thinking about the structure of DNA, and just remember, this was written a while ago. So forget everything that you may know about DNA that we have learned after this, and just let's focus on what they knew about it at this point, only what the article is saying. Beginning at the beginning. The chemical formula of deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA, is now well established. They just figured out the chemical formula for DNA. The molecule is a very long chain, the backbone of which consists of a regular alternation of sugar and phosphate groups. So already in your head, you can be thinking, kind of picturing what this looks like. A long chain, sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate. They go on to describe more what it looks like. To each sugar is attached a nitrogenous base, which can be of 4 different types. So we've got the backbone with sugar and phosphate, and now we have 4 different types of nitrogenous bases that can be connected to the sugars. 2 of the possible bases, adenine and guanine, are purines, and the other 2, thymine and cytosine, are pyrimidines. So we have 4 different kind of weird sounding names. Just keep in mind, adenine, guanine, you can even think just A and G are purines, T and C are pyrimidines. So far, as is known, the sequence of bases along the chain is irregular. The monomer unit, consisting of phosphate, sugar, and base is known as a nucleotide. So we have all this scientific jargon that we have to get through. It's basically telling us the basic structure of DNA. The backbone, of alternating sugar and phosphate, and then the 4 different types of bases that can connect with the sugar. Hopefully that makes sense so far. Now they move on. The first feature of our structure, which is of biological interest, so this is interesting to them, is that it consists not of one chain, but of 2. These 2 chains are both coiled around a common fiber axis. It has often been assumed that since there was only one chain in the chemical formula, there would only be one in the structural unit. So this is an important distinction here. Chemically, there's one chain, which this doesn't make sense to me, but you just have to believe it, I guess. Chemically, there's one chain. Structurally, there are 2, and they're both coiled around this axis. However, the density taken with X-ray evidence suggests very strongly that there are 2. So from what they knew at that point, when they found the density, they said, okay, it looks like there's 2 structurally. So got the basic structure of it. We've got the fact that there are 2 chains, not just one, even though chemically it's 1. Now we have another second biologically important feature, is the manner in which the 2 chains are held together. This is done by hydrogen bonds between the bases. The bases are joined together in pairs, a single base from one chain being hydrogen bonded to a single base from another. So I kind of think of it as a twisted ladder. There's the 2 chains on either side. There's the pairs that connect with each other with the hydrogen bond in the middle. And then that's all coiled around an axis. The important point is that only certain pairs of bases will fit in the structure. One member of a pair must be a purine, and the other a pyrimidine in order to bridge between the 2 chains. So you can't have a purine and a purine. You can't have adenine and guanine connecting the 2 chains together. It's just not going to work. If a pair consisted of 2 purines, for example, there would be no room for it. Somehow it would not fit. It would be too big between those 2 chains if there were 2 purines. We believe that the bases will be present almost entirely in their most probable forms. If this is true, the conditions for forming hydrogen bonds are more restrictive, and the only pairs of bases possible are adenine with thymine and guanine with cytosine. So even though technically pyrimidines and purines can fit together, most probably it's only going to be adenine with thymine and guanine with cytosine. It won't be adenine with cytosine, even though one is a purine and the other one is a pyrimidine. So that's an important distinction. Adenine, for example, they're backing it up with an example, can occur on either chain, but when it does, its partner on the other chain must always be thymine. The phosphate sugar backbone of our model is completely regular, but any sequence of the pairs of bases can fit into the structure. So we have a regular backbone, but then all the pairs that come off can be almost randomly, seemingly, sequenced. It follows, let's move up here. Wait, what did it say? It follows that in a long molecule, many different permutations, many different patterns are possible. And it therefore seems likely that the precise sequence of bases is the code which carries the genetical information. So there's a pattern and a sequence to the different bases that are used. And they're saying it's likely, they don't know for sure yet at this point, they say it's likely that this carries genetical information. If the actual order of the bases on one of the pairs of chains were given, one could write down the exact order of the bases on the other one because of the specific pairing. So if you have half of your chain and you know the bases that are coming off here, you can know the bases that will meet it from the other side. And this is because of specific pairing. Only certain purines can go with certain pyrimidines. Thus, one chain is, as it were, the complement of the other. And it is this feature which which suggests how the deoxyribonucleic acid molecule might duplicate itself. So, because of that, they're thinking um, they're thinking that this gives some light, sheds some light on how it would duplicate itself. Since one half of it, if you only have one half of it, you can figure out what the other half should be like, what the other pairs should be. Okay. Um, you're welcome to put any questions, specific questions you have in the chat, and I'll try to answer them. Um, if you have no other questions, I'm just going to summarize very quickly. They've given us the basic structure of the DNA. We've got backbone, and we have the different bases. And then, second of all, they told us that even though chemically it seems like one chain, structurally there are two, and bases come off from both chains and connect with a hydrogen bond. And in addition to that, it's important that only certain bases connect with other bases. All right, what I'm going to do now, hopefully you have your questions out there. Yeah, hopefully you have your questions with you. And I'm going to give you all 10 minutes to answer the questions. And then once those 10 minutes are done, you can put them in, within those 10 minutes, please put them in the survey so that it will record it, because it will end after those 10 minutes are done. And then we'll look through whichever ones you found to be most difficult. So you can begin. Alrighty. How did it go? How did you feel that went? Looks like you did good. Really, really good. Go ahead and feel free to put any questions that you want me to go over that were difficult for you. Otherwise, I'm just going, looks like I should go over number 27. So I will do that now. Is it sharing my screen right now? I feel like it's not. There we go. And, yeah, I'm seeing that. Let me click change screen really quick and see what's going on. There we go. Yay. Alrighty. So I'm gonna head to passage that we want. Here we go. Number 27. The author's use of the words exact, specific, and complement in lines 47 to 49 in the final paragraph functions mainly to A. Confirm that the nucleotide sequences are known for most molecules of DNA. B. Counter the claim that the sequences of bases along a chain can occur in any order. C. Support the claim that phosphate sugar backbone of the author's model is completely regular. D. Emphasize how one chain of DNA may serve as a template to be copied during DNA replication. So for this question, if they give a line reference, it's always important to go to those lines, just so that you remember the context around these words. So lines 47 to 49, let's look at those. What word did it start with? Oh, okay. 47 to 49. If the actual order of the bases on one of the pairs of chains were given, one could write down the exact, there's one word, exact order of the bases on the other one because of the specific pairing. So at this point, they're talking about how on one's basically side, one half of the bases, if you just have one half of that, then you can tell without having the other half what the pairs are going to be because of the specific pairing that you have to have. Only adenine can go with, which one is it? Thymine, and only guanine with cytosine. So it's talking about how those things are exact. So because of that, you could see how the DNA could duplicate itself. So let's look back at the question now that we know kind of the context. Is this talking about how, is this confirming that the nucleotide sequences are known for most molecules of DNA? No, it's definitely not, and we do know that that in itself is wrong. We don't know the nucleotide sequences for most molecules of DNA, at least according to this passage. We don't know that. So A is going to be wrong. For B, counter the claim that the sequences of bases along a chain can occur in any order. For one, he's not talking about that. In this section, we're talking about how if you have one half of the bases, you can know what the other side is going to be, just because of how they connect exactly. C, support the claim that the phosphate sugar backbone of the author's model is completely regular. Are we talking about the backbone at this point? No, we're talking about the bases. So again, even though some of these may sound kind of right, that's not what this section of the passage is talking about. D, emphasize how one chain of DNA may serve as a template to be copied during DNA replication. Beautiful, perfect. This section is leading up to talking about how it can serve as a template because of the exactness of which bases can fit with the other bases. So the answer for 27 is D. If you would like to explain kind of your thinking, if you picked another answer, your thinking behind which one you picked, that would be great. I'm actually going to switch my screen share because I switched it to the wrong page and I need to be able to draw on this. So just one moment. Mm, I am not sure. One second. Weird. Try this one here. Yay! There we go. Okay. Now I can draw. No, I can't. I'm not on the right one. Whatever. I'm not sure why that happened. Let's continue on. Unless you have any more questions for that passage, we are going to head on to the next one. And the next one is our history passage. So this one's pretty interesting. Be fascinating. One second. Alrighty. So we know this is a history passage. We don't know exactly yet what it's going to be about, but let's read the blurb and find out. This passage is adapted from Virginia Woolf, Three Guineas, 1938. So this is quite old, comparatively. Woolf considers the situation of women in English society. So all of a sudden now we know this is going to be about women, and it's going to be about women in English society. So that means in England, not in America or any other places. Let us begin. Close at hand is a bridge over the River Thames, an admirable vantage ground for us to make a survey. So she's drawn us into the scene. We're on a bridge. So we can begin to picture ourselves there. Over the River Thames. This is in, I think this is in London. Doesn't really matter. This is in England, though. And she says it's a good place to make a survey. Well, we don't know what we're surveying yet, but let us see. The river flows beneath, barges pass, like ships that carry cargo and stuff, laden with timber, bursting with corn. There on one side are the domes and spires of the city, on the other Westminster and the Houses of Parliament. It is a place to stand on by the hour dreaming, but not now. Now we are pressed for time. Now we are here to consider facts. Now we must fix our eyes upon the procession of the sons of educated men. So at this point, she's taken us to this bridge. We're looking at the landscape. There's the river, there's the ships with all the produce, there's the buildings in the city, there's different government buildings. And she says it could be a place where we stand here just dreaming and hanging out. Not now. So that's important. Not now. Now we are pressed for time. So there's something she wants to talk about that's important. And it's not time for daydreaming. Now we are here to consider facts. And what are the facts we're considering? We must fix our eyes upon the procession of the sons of educated men. So she's brought us to a landscape. We're supposed to fix our eyes on this procession of sons of educated men, whatever that is. She's going to describe more about what that is as we go on here. There they go. So now we're pretending, I guess. Maybe there were people there as well that she was watching. But we see this group of men, our brothers, who have been educated at public schools and universities, mounting those steps, passing in and out of those doors, ascending those pulpits, preaching, teaching, administering justice, practicing medicine, transacting business, making money. It is a solemn sight always, a procession, like a caravanserai. I don't know. I think it means caravan. Caravanserai. Never heard of that word before. Caravan crossing a desert. So all these guys, all these men who have been educated, who are having these careers, doing all these jobs, and now she says it's a solemn sight. But now, for the past 20 years or so, it is no longer a sight merely, a photograph or fresco scrawled upon the walls of time at which we can look with merely an aesthetic appreciation. So this isn't just something that we watch now. It's not just an object or something we have no interaction with. For there, traipsing along at the tail end of the procession, we go ourselves. This is important. I wish I could highlight it here. Um, Something's happened to this procession. And who is we? We are the women that she's talking to. So instead of just the men in this procession, um, she's telling us, look, there's some of us women going along with it. And that makes a difference. We who have looked so long at the pageant in books or from a curtain window, watched educated men leaving the house at about 9:30 to go to an office, returning to the house at about 6:30 from an office, need look passively no longer. So before we were just looking at it like it was a play, and just being totally distanced from it. Now we're not just looking anymore. We can leave the house, can mount the steps, pass in and out of the doors, make money, administer justice. We who now agitate these humble pens, so who are now writing, may in another century or two speak from a pulpit. So at this point, looks like some of these ladies are just writing about this, but she says in the future, we could even be speaking from a pulpit, which back then I'm sure ladies didn't do much. Nobody will dare contradict us then. We shall be the mouthpieces of the divine spirit. Not sure what she means by that. A solemn thought, is it not? Who can say whether as time goes on we may not dress in military uniform, with gold lace on our breasts, swords at our sides, and something like the old family coal scuttle on our heads? Save that venerable object was never decorated with plumes of white horsehair. So she's kind of humorously describing the way that they might dress if women were to go into the military. And remember, this little section here, none of these things have happened. She's just imagining into the future the possibilities of things that could happen. You laugh. Indeed, the shadow of the private house still does make those dresses look a little queer. We have worn private clothes so long. So basically, women have back then just lived in private lots of the times. They weren't out in public in the public sphere doing jobs like the men would do. But we have not come here to laugh or to talk of fashions, men's and women's. We are here on the bridge, so she takes us back to the bridge, to ask ourselves certain questions. And they are very important questions, and we have very little time in which to answer them. So there's a sense of urgency here. There's really big questions we need to be answering, and there's not much time. The questions that we have to ask and to answer about that procession during the moment of transition are so important that they may well change the lives of all men and women forever. For we have to ask ourselves, here and now, do we wish to join that procession or don't we? So now we have a little section of questions here. This is her big point here. Do we wish to join the procession or don't we? On what terms shall we join that procession? So in other words, how are we going to join it? What will we do in it? And above all, where is it leading us, the procession of educated men? So there's three questions. Are we going to join it? How are we going to join it? And where is it going? And these are questions, these are really important questions to her that we don't have much time to answer. She says the moment is short. It may last 5 years, 10 years, or perhaps only a matter of a few months longer. But you will object. So here she's going to talk about an objection, a reason that you're going to give that you cannot think about it at this moment. You'll object. You have no time to think. You have your battles to fight, your rent to pay, your bazaars to organize. That excuse shall not serve you, madame. So she's saying, no excuses, ladies. No excuses. As you know from your own experience, and there are facts to prove it, the daughters of educated men have always done their thinking from hand to mouth. So ladies have always done thinking as they did their work in the home, not under green lamps at study tables in the cloisters of secluded colleges. So they haven't had official education. They have thought while they stirred the pot, while they rocked the cradle. It was thus that they won us the right to our brand new sixpence. So they have given us this thing, this opening and opportunity to do something new, to join this procession. It falls to us now to go on thinking, how are we to spend that sixpence? So what are we going to do about this? We can't give an excuse that we can't think about it because we can't get educated like the men. We can think while we're doing all our daily duties, because the ladies who even brought us to this place in history thought while they did their daily duties. They didn't have it any different than us. Think we must. Let us think in offices, in omnibuses, while we are standing in the crowd watching coronations and Lord Mayor shows. Let us think in the gallery of the House of Commons, in the law courts. Let us think at baptisms and marriages and funerals. So in all the different things that the ladies might be doing, think all the time. We need to be thinking about this. Let us never cease from thinking. She basically keeps saying the same thing. Like, we need to think about this, guys. The time is short. This is really important. What are we going to do with this procession? What is this civilization in which we find ourselves? What are these ceremonies, and why should we take part in them? What are these professions, and why should we make money out of them? Where, in short, is it leading us, the procession of the sons of educated men? So, where are we going? What is the meaning of the careers? What are the meaning of the ceremonies? Why do we do what we do? Whew, okay. In general, she's brought us to the bridge. She wants us to look at this procession of educated men. And as she talks about the different things that these educated men do, she talks about how it's different now. Something's changed. Now there's ladies in the same procession who are starting to do the same things. Now she talks about there's many things that they haven't done yet, but she's looking forward in this section over here. Not that huge section. From like 25 down here. We're looking forward to what could happen. Then she comes back. She says, "Okay, let's come back to the real important reason I'm writing this. What are we going to do with this procession? Are we going to join it? Where is it going, etc." And then lastly, you don't have an excuse to not be thinking if you are a woman nowadays. All right. Hopefully that was a helpful run through of the passage. Again, we're going to do the same thing just like last time. We're going to put up a survey so that you can answer these questions on your own within those 10 minutes. And again, we'll look over whichever ones were the hardest. So hopefully, and God, you have that ready. If not, we might have to go ahead and just write down the answers that you pick, and then we'll put them in the chat, and then check it that way. Oh, there we go. Yay. So you can begin now. Alrighty. I'm gonna start sharing my screen again, and we will do the last passage. Looks like it's sharing correctly. All right. So, actually, when I was preparing for this, I realized I hadn't done this in so long. It was actually completely new to me. I don't know why I didn't remember it from last time. Um, this was pretty interesting. It's going to be a double passage, science passage. So, we're going to have to read the first passage, kind of keep that in our minds, switch to the second passage, and then at the end be able to kind of hold both of those in our hands and um, understand the differences and similarities between them and the main points of both. So it'll be kind of interesting. Let's just look at our little blurb right here. Passage 1 is adapted from Michael Slezak, Space Mining, the Next Gold Rush. So this is going to be about space, which is always exciting. Space mining. Interesting things to put together. Space Mining, the Next Gold Rush by New Scientist. Passage 2 is from the editors of New Scientist, Taming the Final Frontier, which that title is a little more ambiguous. Anyway, we know it's going to be about space, and we know it's going to be about mining, so probably different types of minerals. Let's begin. Passage 1. Follow the money, and you will end up in space. Interesting little starting sentence there. Looks like space might be pretty lucrative. That's the message from a first one of its kinds forum on mining beyond the Earth. Convened in Sydney by the Australian Centre for Space Engineering Research, the event brought together mining companies, robotics experts, lunar scientists, and government agencies that are all working to make space mining a reality. So we have all these different types of people who do different jobs that normally probably wouldn't get together. Mining companies, people who are into robotics, lunar scientists, government agencies, they're all here in Sydney, and they're talking about space mining. The forum comes hot on the wheels of the 2012 unveiling of 2 private asteroid mining firms. So looks like they want to find minerals in asteroids. That's pretty insane. Planetary Resources of Washington says it will launch its first prospecting telescopes in 2 years, while Deep Space Industries of Virginia, so we have several different groups here, people from Washington, people from Virginia. These Deep Space Industries from Virginia hopes to be harvesting metals from asteroids by 2020. That's interesting because 2020's passed, so I wonder, I haven't looked it up yet, but I wonder what's going on now, if they were able to reach that goal. Another commercial venture that sprung up in 2012, Golden Spike of Colorado, so you have another place, will be offering trips to the moon, including to potential lunar miners. All pretty insane stuff. We have basically just conglomeration of different groups who are hoping to start mining in space. That's the basic gist of what we've read already. Now, within a few decades, these firms may be meeting earthly demands for precious metals. So what would space mining do? One thing it will do is it will meet earthly demands for precious metals like platinum and gold, and the rare earth elements vital for personal electronics, such as yttrium and lanthanum. So we might get some precious metals that Earth needs out of space, but like the gold rush pioneers who transformed the western United States, the first space miners won't just enrich themselves. So it's not just going to be for the Earth. They also hope to build an off-planet economy free of any bonds with Earth, in which the materials extracted and processed from the moon and asteroids are delivered for space-based projects. So they want to use these minerals from space for things in space, not just for things on the Earth. In this scenario, so if they were to use the things they've mined from space in space, then water mined from other worlds could become the most desired commodity, the most desired thing. In the desert, what's worth more, a kilogram of gold or a kilogram of water? Asked Chris Zachney of Honeybee Robotics in New York. Gold is useless. Water will let you live. So basically, Up there in space, gold won't be that necessary, but water might be one of the most necessary things to have. So just in the context in which they would be getting this water, it would be very precious. Water ice, now it's going to talk about what they could use the water for. Water ice from the moon's poles could be sent to astronauts on the International Space Station for drinking or as a radiation shield. Splitting water into oxygen and hydrogen makes spacecraft fuel. So ice-rich asteroids could become interplanetary refueling stations. All this crazy stuff. And remember, this is all could. This is all might be. This has not happened yet, but they're just hypothesizing what might happen in the future. Let's see if there's, okay, a little bit more. Companies are eyeing the iron, silicon, and aluminum in lunar soil and asteroids, which could be used in 3D printers to make spare parts or machinery. Others want to turn space dirt into concrete for landing pads, shelters, and roads. So here, it's just giving a few more examples of what you could use the things from space in. So 3D printers for machinery and concrete landing pads. Okay, passage 1 has technically just kind of been more of an overview of this idea of space mining. They've got different companies and firms who are trying to make space mining a reality from different areas with Australia and then different states in the US. And then we have different things they might use it for. They might use it for things that we need on Earth, but also for projects in space. And it talks about the water, how they could use water. And then finally, a couple other things they could use stuff from space for. Okay, so we have that in our heads. Now let's continue to passage 2 and see what it has to say. The motivation for deep space travel is shifting from discovery to economics. So people aren't just wanting to know what's out there. They're thinking about money now. The past year has seen a flurry of proposals aimed at bringing celestial riches down to Earth. All these proposals, these things haven't happened yet. They are just suggesting them. They're hoping for them. No doubt this will make a few billionaires even wealthier, but we all stand to gain, so there's positive for all of us. The mineral bounty and spin-off technologies could enrich us all. But looks like this author is not completely on board. But before the miners start firing up their rockets, we should pause for thought. At first glance, space mining seems to sidestep most environmental concerns. So it seems pretty environmentally friendly. There is probably no life on asteroids, and thus no habitats to trash, but its consequences, both here on Earth and in space, merit careful consideration. So this guy wants to think about consequences. He doesn't just want to dive in right from the get-go without any thought. He wants to think about and consider the consequences for space and for Earth. Part of this is about principles. Some will argue that space's magnificent desolation is not ours to despoil, just as they argue that our own planet's poles should remain pristine. So even places where people don't live, they think they should keep it as it was made. Others will suggest that glutting ourselves on space's riches is not an acceptable alternative to developing more sustainable ways of earthly life. So they're suggesting, are you guys kind of just avoiding being sustainable on Earth by trying to get stuff out of space? They don't think that's a good reason. So he's just suggesting some ideas that people have brought up that might cause you to be a little more wary of just heading off to space and start mining. History suggests that those will be hard lines to hold. Basically, it's going to be hard to keep our standards on this, and it may be difficult to persuade the public that such barren environments are worth preserving. So he's not sure that this concern will be taken into account. After all, they exist in vast abundance, and even fewer people will experience them than have walked through Antarctica's icy landscapes. Nobody's going to be up there in space, so people won't really care about trashing it or using the resources that are up there. There's also the emerging off-world economy to consider. The resources that are valuable in orbit and beyond may be very different than those we prize on Earth. So we don't even know what resources are up there that are very precious to those in outer space. If we were to, start things in outer space, we don't know. Questions of their stewardship have barely been broached. And the relevant legal and regulatory framework is fragmentary, to put it mildly. We haven't put any boundaries or guidelines in place. There's nothing legal about this. Yeah, they haven't really thought about those type of things. Space miners, like their earthly counterparts, are often reluctant to engage with such questions. They don't really want to think about this, which makes sense, During the gold rush, people just rushed out there. That's why it's called the gold rush. One speaker at last week's space mining forum in Sydney, Australia, so this is the same event that the first passage talked about. The speaker concluded with a plea that regulation should be avoided. They don't want any rules or framework to be set up for this. But miners have much to gain from a broad agreement on the for-profit exploitation of space. So the person who wrote this article thinks that it would be a good thing to just have a simple agreement about what are we going to do, how are we going to do it, what are we not allowed to do, etc. Without consensus, claims will be disputed, investments risky, and the gains made insecure. It is in all of our long-term interest to seek one out. So he basically lands at the end with his main point. We should consider this a little more thoughtfully before we set out into outer space to mine. And we should have at least some sort of framework to guide how we're going to go about this. Okay, to summarize, first passage kind of introduces the topic, space mining. This is a thing. There's different people who are hoping to do some asteroid mining, some trips to the moon, and lunar mining. And then it talks about what they might do with that space mining. Things they'll do for Earth and things that they'll do in space with the water and other things. Water is just one example of things they might use in space that might be very important in space. So that was the first passage. And then the second passage says, yeah, this is all great. There's lots of opportunity, but we should just kind of take a moment to think about the consequences of this. It gives a few of the different consequences that some people have been a little concerned about. And then it talks about the need to have some sort of consensus, some sort of framework about, like, before they end up going to space, so that there's no disputes, risky investments, insecure gains. If this is to go well for everybody, it'd be good to have a plan before starting out. So that'll be it for our last passage. That'll be it for our whole reading section for practice test 1. So next time we will look at, shucks, I don't even know which one we're looking at next. We will look at another passage in another practice test, and we'll probably go through either 2 or 3 depending on how hard they are. So yeah, with that, I will sign off, and I will see you guys next week.